Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and we are back at Duelist Den. And I've gotten quite a few requests from viewers to do a video on cleaning the model 1859 Sharps Infantry Rifle. So that's what we're going to do. But before we can clean it, we got to get it dirty. And that's the fun part. So let's do that first. Well, those of you who are into Civil War history probably know that during the Gettysburg campaign, General Lee's troops actually made it across York County, Pennsylvania, to the shores of the Susquehanna River. So they would have been in this general area. So I figured if that had happened, Evil Roy would have been happy to cause a little mayhem to help them out. So I hope my southern friends will forgive me for calling him Rebel Roy today, but let's see if we can put one of those big 500 grain slugs into Evil Roy and stop his depredations. Get him! Well, if you haven't seen my earlier Sharps videos, the 1859 Sharps is a breech loader. So it's got a falling block action. It's a big breech block, drops down, and it loads with paper cartridges. So let me get one out. So the way it loads, it's just like a regular, brass cartridge gun. You just load a paper cartridge in, and now we've got to cap it with a percussion cap. Well, I had previously reported that I had trouble with these Schutzen brand musket caps. And I certainly did. I mean, I had many failures to pop a cap. And I was pretty frustrated about it. And I mentioned it, I think, in a previous video, and I mentioned it on some Facebook groups. And I had a lot of guys come back and say, oh, I use them and they're just fine. And I thought, boy, I must be just a complete idiot and don't know how to use a cap, right? But as it turned out, a few of them gave me a little more information. They said, I use them and they're just fine after I turned down the cone of my nipple a little bit so they fit. Because it turns out these caps, this is what they look like. All right, they look like they're made out of copper like most caps are, but they're not, they're steel. And therefore they don't expand the way an RWS does or CCI does when you put it on the cone of the nipple. So lots of times they were not coming in contact, the primer wasn't inside with the top of the cone because they're just too big. So I reduced the diameter of the cones of my nipples with some small files and then with emery cloth until these things fit on pretty easily. So now we're going to see if that worked and if these are going to be reliable caps for me, which I hope they do because I had to buy 5,000 of them when I got them. So I got a lot of them, and I certainly want them to work. Okay, so cartridge is in now, we've got to cap it. And I'm doing something a little bit different here, because just yesterday in the mail, I got one of these cappers from my friend Anders Gustafsson in Sweden. And Anders had seen me doing these Sharps videos, and he made a musket version of his capper for me. They're 3D printed. And you've seen me test out the pistol version of this on a Colt 1860. But I've got to say, I really like this because you just slide it over the cone of the nipple, pull, and you're capped. And it fits in my cap box, and it's much easier to manipulate than pulling out an individual cap, which is kind of a pain in the butt, right? But with this, it's easy to manipulate, it's easy to get the gun charged, and on the whole, I like it. Well, I've got a water jug, gallon water jug, about 40 yards downrange, and let's see if the 59 Sharps can take that out or not. Got him. Well, let's see if I can do the same thing with a watermelon. Got him, got him. All right, I'm going to try something a little more challenging, smaller target. I've got a head of cabbage down there. I'm going to see if I can shred it with the Sharps. You know, I got the squirrels are chattering back and forth at each other in the trees, and I think what they're saying is, why is he shooting perfectly good food? What's wrong with that man? And that's because squirrels might be experts in survival, but they are Philistines when it comes to art. All right, let's get that cabbage. Well, I just nicked the cabbage. All right, we had our fun, now we got to pay the piper. Black powder guns have got to be cleaned. And Sharps have to be cleaned pretty quickly. Because they can rust in places where you don't even know they have places. Now, the first thing I always do, and believe me, this is just the way I do it. If you do it another way that works for you, great. Because in black powder, there's always more than one way to skin the cat. But this is how I do it. So I start by removing the breech block. And there's a little pin detent right here. Let me show you that a little bit closer. All right, here's that little detent pin. So you can get a good look at it. All right, you can push it with your thumbnail. I'm just going to use this to get it going. And that lever will just slide over it. And you just rotate it all the way down. At that point, you pull this whole hinge pin out. Now, depending on how much you shot it, it might be difficult, right? But then you can pull the entire breech assembly out. All right, so you're going to get this whole assembly is going to come down. Okay, so I'm going to put the rifle aside and I'm going to clean the breech first. So we've got the breech block out. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this plate. And I'm just going to take ballistol and water. Right, so it's 90% water, 10% ballistol. You can just use plain water, by the way. Right, I'm just going to spray these two parts, both sides, and I'm going to clean them off and put them aside. So, pretty simple. Just take a cloth, clean them. Want to get all the crud off, but they're going to have stains that won't come off. But you want to make sure you get all the fouling, actual fouling off of them. And that's what I'm going to do. So, for this gun, I always have a supply of Q-tips and pipe cleaners to get into these nooks and crannies. So, I'm going to get this all cleaned off. Okay, I've got these two parts cleaned off. Now, my gun is not a stock Pedersoli. It has the Larry Flea's breech block modification, which makes it much more reliable. But if you got a regular Pedersoli Sharps or any Sharps, the parts are essentially the same. So what I'm doing is going to continue to work for you too. All right, the next thing I do is I remove the nipple. And for that, you need a nipple wrench that is sized for musket nipples. So it'll be a big one. You can get them from Track of the Wolf. You can get them from Dixie Gun Works. You can find them most anywhere, but that's what you're going to need, so make sure you get one. I'm going to clean this nipple up. By the way, turning the nipple down made this gun almost 100% reliable with those chutes and caps. I still had two of them that failed to go off in the first pop. And believe me, there's no reason they shouldn't have been fully seated. So, I'm still not crazy about those caps, I mean, but I got a lot of them. So, as long as they're around about 90% reliable, I'll be okay, because I'm not actually going to be fighting any enemy soldiers with them. I'm just planking. Okay. I got that largely cleaned out. Now, I always take a pipe cleaner and run it through. You get some really complex channels that the priming fire's got to go through to set off the cartridge. So you really want to have everything completely opened up. So you can see here I'm pushing the pipe cleaner right through. I want to make sure that that is both clean and dry. No crud in it. So I'm going to put that aside with these parts. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this clean out screw right here. As you can see, it has an indexing line on it. The thing about that screw that's so important is it is what directs the primer fire out to the cartridge. And I'll show you in just a second. So you want to have screwdrivers that fit, by the way. That's quite important. My fingers are all wet and greasy. Alright, I'm just going to clean this up down here, then I'm going to show you something. So this screw is stainless steel, which is handy. On account of, it's really got to hold up. Okay, so if you can get a good look at this, it's beveled. The way that fits in the breech block, the priming goes off, the flash goes through the flash hole, hits an elbow, makes a 90-degree turn, and then it hits that bevel, and that is what shoots it out through here, right, into the cartridge. So we want to make sure that that whole chamber is very well cleared out. Now I'm going to take the O-ring out, and so far I don't need to replace it. I'm looking, this O-ring is like the heart of the Larry Fleas system, so I want to make sure it's in good shape. I've got about 10 of them in the patch box of the gun if I need to replace it, and that one is still good. In fact, I have not replaced one yet, but I have no doubt that it will be soon. Okay, so now I'm going to start cleaning out the actual breech block itself. And this is where our handy dandy Q-tips come in quite handy. Alright, so we got there are a lot of nooks and crannies that you want to get clean. Right, it's very important, because it'll rust anywhere in here. So we want to get all of the black powder fouling cleaned off. Get this nice and clean, get all the residue out of there. Very important, because that is what is going to govern how well it seals up. And we definitely want it to seal up well. Okay. Alright, that's pretty good. So I've got the externals pretty clean now. Now I'm going to take these pipe cleaners and I'm going to go into every nook and cranny and make sure that we got everything clean. And these pipe cleaners will get in everywhere. Okay, now when I'm feeling really good about that, I'm going to take canned air. Alright, because I want to make sure that is all dried out. I don't want any oil or any crap in there at all. Back over it again. Okay. Now, I'm going to take this clean out screw. I'm going to put it in, and I'm going to make sure that I line it up with the indexing mark. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but we got it lined up with the mark, so we're good to go on that. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of white lithium grease. Not much, but a little bit. I get it on my finger. And I'm going to coat the threads on the nipple with that. Okay. Make sure that's clear. Alright, so now I'm going to replace the nipple. Okay. I'm going to replace the O-ring. And I'm just going to lay this piece on it so everything stays together with the pin. Okay, and now it's time to clean the bore. Now, even though this is a 54 caliber gun, a 54 caliber jag is not going to fit down the bore. In fact, I use a 50 caliber jag to clean the bore and a 54 to clean the chamber, and I keep both of them in my cartridge box. So I'm going to pull a 50 out. And pop it on the stick here. Now, like I said, I use ballast and water. So I'm just going to wet down a cleaning patch and send it down the bore. Alright, so that comes out good and filthy. Alright, I'm going to do another wet one. Okay, now I'm going to put the 54 caliber jag on. I'm going to do the chamber. I take this same patch that I just used for the chamber, and I'm going to go over all of the surfaces here in the receiver. I'll do another wet one. Never hurts. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So I will go to dry ones now. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Just wet. Alright, one more and I think we'll be completely dry. Excellent. Alright. If I knew I was going to be shooting this again, like within the next week, I wouldn't bother with this step, but I don't know when I'll have this guy out again. So I'm going to take some pure ballistol, and I'm going to just put it on a patch, and I'm going to run it down the board just as rust preventative. Now before I shoot the gun, I'll run a dry patch down to get any residual oil out of there. Otherwise, it's certainly going to affect your first shot. Alright, now I'm going to take this ballistol and I'm going to just go over the outside of the action with it. This is very good rust preventative. Now I'm just going to wipe off the excess. Now we're ready to put the gun back together. Okay, so I've lubed up the sides of the breech block with white lithium grease. Right, I'm putting the plate back in, bearing up against the O-ring. Now, right, I'm putting the plate back in, bearing up against the O-ring. Now, I'm going to reinsert the breech block. Right. Now I just have to get that pin lined up and put that in. Okay, I'm going to get the pinhole lined up. There we go. I'll put some white lithium grease on the pin. You don't have to use lithium grease, but I'll tell you what, this stuff works fantastically and will keep you running longer. Okay. Got it lined up. Now I got to push it over the detent. Alright, so we'll just get it closed up. Boom. And we are good, right? Back in action. All clean. I'm just going to oil the outside of the barrel, wipe the stock down, and put it away. So that's how we clean the Sharps. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on cleaning the Pedersoli 1859 Sharps. I had fun making it. Got to come out here and plink with my Sharps, and that is always fun. But if you liked it, you know the drill. Give it a thumbs up. Mess with the algorithm for me. And by all means, subscribe. We've got plenty of this stuff coming up in the future as well. And until next week, bye.